Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Samach Gimel. We are now in the final chapter of Masechet Avodah Zarah. And so let me share my screen and we will get started. So, yesterday we began the fifth and final chapter of Maseches Avodah Zarah. We are discussing the question of the status of money received to work with Yayin Nesech. That's what the topic of our Mishnah is. And the opening Mishnah distinguished between wages for working specifically with Yayin Nesech. So if I tell you, so if an idolater who used this wine to serve his god, and now asks you to take it from here over to California, and he'll pay you to do it, you're not allowed to do it because you're being paid to work with wine that was used to worship an idol, and we don't worship idols, and we don't even do work in connection with things that are for idols.
Kind of wine, white wine.
It could be white wine, it could be red wine, it could be all different kinds of wine. So it could be rosé. But the point is that the person said, who used the wine in their worship of an idol, asked you to take it. Now, if on the other hand, the guy says, listen, I want to hire you for the next month. And you say, great, okay. And then he says, one of the things I'd like you to do is to take this wine and to California. Then you're allowed to do it because you're not being hired just for this. You're being hired for a broader purpose. And so that was what our Mishnah discussed. So if you're paid in general for work, and that work included with work with Yain Nesek, then the wages are not prohibited. And we explained that this is a rabbinic penalty imposed by the rabbis and because of the strictures associated with idolatry. We don't want you dealing with anything with idolatry. Now, we concluded yesterday by discussing the case of the wages of a prostitute, which cannot be brought as a sacrifice. So if somebody goes to a prostitute, gives the prostitute a sheep, that sheep cannot be used as a sacrifice in the Beit HaMikdash. And so it's a very straightforward rule that can't be done. But the question is what constitutes the wages of a prostitute? So, for example, we noted that if the payment and the action aren't at the same time, so for example, they engage in the act of prostitution on Wednesday, and the next week on Tuesday, the man comes and gives her the payment. That payment is the repayment of a debt and not necessarily considered for the action. And so as a result, that's going to be okay. And you would be able to use that animal as a sacrifice. On the other hand, if the man pays on Monday for the act that he's planning to have happen on Friday, well, then that act on Monday, the payment on Monday, on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, before the act, if she were to want to offer it as a sacrifice, she would be allowed to offer it as a sacrifice because it's not yet wages for prostitution. So that was what we dealt with at the end of the day yesterday. And so, again, where the payment came first and allowed the prostitute to acquire the animal immediately if she needed it, then if she offered it as a sacrifice before the act, the prohibition did not apply. And so the Gemara now asks about a modified version of this case. What happens not if she is offering it as an actual sacrifice, but boy Rav Hoshia, again, 10th line down on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph 63a, Kadma v'hikdishu mahu. What happens if instead of going and taking it to the Beis HaMikdash and offering it as a korban, she actually says, listen, this animal is going to be sanctified as a korban, but she didn't yet bring it. So she sanctified it as a sacrifice. Kevan de Amar Mar Amiraso Ligavoa Kemisiraso Lahedjo. Well, there is a statement. This is a statement in a Mishnah in Kiddushin Daf Kaf Chadam and Bet, and appears elsewhere as well, that if in fact one says that they're going to give something to as a sacrifice, as soon as you do that, or otherwise to the Beis HaMikdash, then as soon as you've done that, it's like it's already been transferred to a third party. And so as a result, given the fact that it's like it's already been transferred to a third party, command akriv te dami, it should be treated as if she has already brought it, and therefore it would be permitted and it would not be a problem. O dilma, or maybe hashdamia haka kai ve'ize be'ene. But, or you could say, you know what? Right now it exists as a korban. And so as a result, because it exists right now as a korban, we are going to say that, or meaning it exists right now as an animal, and it's not yet destroyed. It hasn't been burnt on the altar. So as a result, when now they do engage in the act of prostitution, so now it becomes an esnan zona. It becomes the wages of a prostitute. And therefore, even though it's already been identified as a potential korban, it's still going to be prohibited. The Rebbe Elazar. Well, 1 second. Rebbe Elazar, who we had at the very end of the day yesterday, he said the following words: the Amar Rebbe Elazar, shekadma v'hikrivato, that if she gets up and she brings it as a sacrifice before she engages in the prostitution, and so what's the implication of that wording? Dafka hakrivato. It seems like it means only if she brought it, meaning it's not enough to have set it aside. Aval hikdishatu lo, setting aside as the sacrifice is not enough. Isn't that the implication of what Rabbi Elazar says? So no, do Rabbi Elazar gufei kami baile. So the point is that this question is within Rabbi Elazar. And what was Rabbi Elazar's mentality in saying his statement? My mifsha pshita le Rabbi Elazar de hakrivato adavka. Is it that when Rebbe Elazar said that it was specifically that only if she brought it as a sacrifice, he means only if you brought it as a sacrifice, and if you didn't bring it as a sacrifice, about hakdishatu lo, but if you did only made it consecrated, that would not be enough. Because it still exists at the time that they engage in the relationship. Odilma, or maybe hakrivato pshitale, or maybe it was clear to him that if she brought it as an offering, that it would be good. V'ktishato misapkale, and he was unsure about it. Meaning, did he make the statement about the fact that it works when she brings it as a sacrifice because he knew not bringing it as a sacrifice didn't work? Or did he say it because he wasn't sure about the alternative? And as a result, that's why he didn't say anything. And teku, the Gemara does not, leaves it unresolved. We don't have an answer. And so as a result, it seems that at least for, in terms of how we would apply the law, we would say if the woman only set it aside and now wants to bring the animal as a sacrifice, we presumably would not allow her to do so. Okay.
So what's the point of designated as a sacrifice? What can she do with it after that? No, what can anyone do with it? Once it's
nothing. It's only a sacrifice. But the point is that every animal before it gets offered on as a sacrifice needs to be sanctified as a sacrifice. Now you can do it, and it is wise to do it immediately beforehand. But here, if she was, news that she was getting this as an Esnan Zona present, so maybe she wanted to try, and she wasn't going to be able to make it to Yerushalayim, and she wanted to use it as a korban, the only option that she has is to try and sanctify it. And so in the end, we'll say that it doesn't work, but that's exactly the question. But you're right, that it is not wise to sanctify an animal if you are not yet in Yerushalayim, about to sacrifice it, and to slaughter it in the Beis Hamikdash. You're just better off waiting as long as possible, because if the animal runs away or anything else happens, you're gonna have, there's gonna be a problem problem. And so that's the
Well,
base.
there's nothing else to do with it,
But you're
unless I'm
exactly, there's
thinking
nothing else you can do with that now.
maybe
Correct.
a tamura, maybe a tamura.
No, no, no. You don't want to make a tamura. Then that animal is kodesh and the other animal is kodesh.
Right.
What you would you know the what you end up having to do is if in fact you can't bring it, if it now develops a mum, you have to then you would be allowed to make the replacement. But yeah, you're exactly right that essentially there's nothing that can be done with this sacrifice once it's been set aside other than offer it as a sacrifice. Okay. So we said one of the parts that we said before was if in fact
She can't
the
even eat it then, right? Can she?
right you can't not without offering it as a sacrifice you can't eat it. That's correct.
So therefore, if she's stuck, then supposedly she got paid for her act, but then she can't do anything with it.
That's
Nothing.
correct. If that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, part of our effort to discourage harlotry. So, ba'alev v'akar nasan law. So, if on the other hand they had relations and then he gave her the payment. So again, ethnana mutter. That payment is permitted because again, it's considered as if he owed her a debt and now he was just repaying the debt. It wasn't for specifically viewed as specifically for the harlotry. So Uraminhu, 1 second. There's another brisa that seems to suggest otherwise because it says Ba'aleha v'achar kach nasan law if he first has relations and then gives her the payment afilu mikanat shalosh shanim, even if he does it 3 years from now, etnana usher. What the payment is prohibited to use as a sacrifice on the base in the base of Migdash. So how do we resolve one place where it says if the payment's later, it's okay, and to use it as a sacrifice, and in another place it says it's not? So Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Amar of Chisda, lo kasha, had Amar his bali li b'talezeh. If in fact the John says that he listen, have relations with me for this lamb, so then that's going to be a problem even if it's paid later. As Rashi says, Rashi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, Kol Kama to Yahivla Havi Etanan, that whenever he eventually gives that to her, it's going to be the payment for the harlotry because this lamb, the mahashta kanise, because essentially she's making a kinyan of it immediately. Okay, and hada amarla his bali betelestam. And on the other one, the other case where it's going to be okay is where he says, "Listen, have relations with me, and I'll give you a lamb." And then later he figures out which lamb it's going to be. So as a result, he didn't identify the specific one, and so it'll be okay. As Rashi says, next Rashi, ki yahevla la'achar zman, when he gives that lamb to her after a certain amount of time, lav esnanhu. It's not considered an exchange for the act of relations. Dahashtahu dekanyala. Because this now is the time where he made the kinyan for her. So she didn't have any rights to it before now. So 1 second. Well, 1 second. Who cares that he says that this is your lamb? How did she make a kinyan on it? In order for her to make a kinyan, we have the principle of ma'os kanos midoraisa, that even though when you pay the money, that causes the kinyan biblically, that's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, we say that derabanan, you need Mashiach, you need to do an act of taking. It's not enough because we're concerned, as we saw in Bava Metzia, that if I buy something from you and I don't take it, you're going to tell me that it burned in your attic. And as a result, because you're no longer responsible for it because you were the seller, it's my loss, even though I gave you the money already. And so as a result, what we say is that if I give you the money, I have to actually take the item. Otherwise, you remain responsible. And if it were to burn in your attic, you would have to give me back my money. So that, and therefore we keep the responsibility with the person who's holding it. Now you can contract around that, but the general rule is that the responsibility is with the person that holds it. So how did this prostitute take possession of this lamb. So the Gemara answers, Bizona Avodas Kachavim. So answer number one is we're dealing with a non-Jewish prostitute. And non-Jews, we do say Ma'os Konos. We don't impose this limitation because if we're doing business with a non-Jew, so then as a result, we have to go with the basics. And so as a result, the lo kanya v'mashicha, they don't need to do mashicha. All they need to do is pay for it. And so as a result, if you say this lamb, then as soon as they engage in the relationship, that's the payment. And therefore, at that moment, the lamb becomes hers. And so as a result, it truly is a case of payment in exchange for the lamb, if you know which lamb it is. And
So
so
where do
as
we have that non-Jews are bringing a lamb on the Mizbeach? If she's a non-Jewish woman, where's even the Havan? What's the issue here?
So excellent question. The idea is that first of all, non-Jews are allowed to bring a korban ola in the Beis Hamikdash 100%. In fact, if you take a look at when the Beis Hamikdash was dedicated, Shlomo, in his speech to the Jewish people, says that, and his tefillah to Hashem is that people should want to come and bring sacrifices, and the sacrifices should be accepted by Hashem when they come to bring sacrifices, even people from other nations. So 100%, one is she could. And second is that if she then exchanges it to and sells that animal to a Jew, I believe that prohibition would continue to apply as well. So there are both those reasons it makes a difference. But but now we offer an alternative answer that in fact maybe she's Jewish. La'olam bezoni Israeli. So maybe in fact the Gemara was concerned a little bit about your point, Kenneth, and therefore wanted another answer and have an answer that where the woman is Jewish. Ukagon dekai b'chatzera. And the situation is where the lamb was brought into her chutzner. And so as a result, again, as soon as they engage in the relationships, so then she can acquire it even without having engaged in Mashiach, because her property can make the acquisition for her. Well, 1 second. If in fact you're telling us that she's acquiring the lamb through her property, when we say that they have relations and then he transfers it to her, hakanyala, if it's in her property, why didn't she make an acquisition of it already? As Rashi says, hakanyala, mehashta, she should have acquired it already. Kodem bia, even before the relations, meaning it's considered as if she acquired it now. How can we call it? What's the situation where they have relations and then the payment is? So lo tzricha deshavio nihali apotiki. Because the point is that we want everything to be involved in the same case. We want everything to say. So now we're going to say no. The case where it's not going to work is, or where it's going to be considered a payment later, is if he says, listen, this lamb is going to be an apotiki. An apotiki is basically collateral, or a sense of collateral where the collateral is only this particular item. You can only collect from this animal. And so he says to her, the Amrla, if I give you money that I owe you by X date, so then fine, then you'll take the money. But if I don't, but then you could take this payment as your payment. And so as a result, in that situation, at the time they have the relationship, the animal that's been specified is only an apotiki, is only a collateral, and it's not definitely going to be transferred to her. And so only later, when the later time comes and he hasn't actually paid her, then it becomes her payment. And so as a result, the payment and is later than the relationship. Okay. So how did we get to this whole topic of es non zona? How did we get to this topic? Let me, my apologies for not scrolling. How did we get to this topic? Well, we got this topic because just before we addressed the prostitution case at the end of the day yesterday, we noted how Rabbi Yanai's household would borrow Shemitah produce from the poor in the Shemitah year, that's the seventh year, Shavuos, and repay the poor in the eighth year. Now, ordinarily, you're not allowed to hold on to that produce at the end of the year. You have to get rid of it. You have to have consumed it all. You're not allowed to engage in any business with it, etc. And you need it out of your house if you're not eating it. And so the Gemara the question that the Gemara was raising is whether that kind of payment. Remember, the whole topic of our chapter is about payment for working with idolatry. Can we analogize these two cases? That when Rabbi Yanai gave over took the produce from the seventh year and gave back produce in the eighth year, is that eighth year produce that they give back effectively the payment for the seventh year produce, and therefore subject to the same rules as the seventh year produce? Just like we say with respect to the payment of work for idolatry, that the payment is treated as prohibited, just like the idolatry is prohibited. So that was the analogy that we came up with, and we were challenging Rabbi Yanai, and so, but Rabbi Yochanan explained that it was okay because the Shemitah produce no longer existed when the repayment was made, meaning in the eighth year, it was no longer existing produce. And so as a result, so that's why the payment was not considered exchanged for Shemitah produce, and therefore the repayment could be used by the poor people. In fact, again, this was a wonderful, kind thing that Rabbi Yanai was doing, because he was taking produce that was not going to be able to be used by the poor in the eighth year, and was making it into produce that the poor could use in the eighth year. And now the Gemara is going to challenge Rabbi Yochanan's explanation. So again, Rabbi Yochanan said it was okay because when the repayment was made in year 8, all of the year 7 produce had been eaten. So the Gemara asks,
Well, why are you saying that it was not existent anymore? Because some produce, in fact, the Mishnah in Shemitah talks about produce that is still growing from into the eighth year, and there are different periods of biur, and some can last until Pesach and so forth. When the time for biur comes into the eighth year, so this produce is still present from the seventh year and is permissible to be used as Shemitah produce some different periods of time, depending on the type of fruit or the type of vegetable, when the actual time of biur comes into play.
100% correct. And what I'm trying to clarify, and thank you for helping me do so, is that the whole point of this project was to enable the poor to eat beyond the final biur time. So whatever produce it was that was given by the poor to Rabbi Yanai's household, Rabbi Yanai would then make sure to give to the poor after the date of biur for that produce. And the point is that Rabbi Yanai and his family and others would consume the produce of the seventh year by the biur date, as they have to, and then they would repay the poor. So now the poor can have produce post biur date in year 8 that they have now the ability to consume. That's exactly the idea.
So it's not the produce that remained from 70. It's
no,
new
exactly.
produce.
It's new produce.
Okay.
New produce, 100%. So now the Rav Sheshes is going to challenge this approach of saying, well, you say that if it doesn't exist, you can't worry about it as being an exchange for Shemitah. But listen to the following. Masav Rav Sheshes. Omer, following Brisa, Omer Adam Lechama Rav Belufo Alav. If somebody tells his donkey drivers and his workers, and Rashi tells us, Ovdei Kochavim O Amei Haaretz, last Rashi on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, that these are not Jewish or they are ignorant. Yeah, they don't know the laws. Here's $100. Go and buy your dinner and food that you need. And go and get the drinks that you need. You're allowed to do that, and you don't need to be worried about them buying things that they're not allowed to buy. As we turn to Samach Gimel Amud, lo mishum shvius, you don't need to worry about the Shemitah year. You lo mishum meiser, you don't need to worry about trumas and maestros. Lo mishum yain nesach, you don't need to worry that they're going to buy yain nesach. Ve'im amar lahem. However, if he were to say to them, go out and eat, and then I'll pay you back. Go out and drink, and I will pay. Meaning, I said pay you back, but really what I mean is pay on your behalf to the whatever merchant you buy it from. Choshesh mishum shviyas. There you do need to worry about shviyas. Umishum meiser. Umishum yain nesach. And because of Meiser and because of Yain Nesek. But 1 second, when the person gets paid back, the food no longer exists. So if their food no longer exists, why should we need to be worried about it? So Alma ki kapara demei iser kapara. When he's paying for the Shemitah produce that has already been eaten, it's as if he paid something that's prohibited. So hakinami, here too, in the case of Rabbi Yanai, ki kapara demei isura kapara. He also is paying for something that should be prohibited. So how can you explain Rabbi Yanai's action and this brisa? So Tirgama Rav Chisda b'chenvani hamakifo. So Rav Chisda offers the first approach, and he says that we're dealing with a storekeeper who is makifo. And Rashi tells us makifo. It's Rashi on Samach Gimel Amud 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Shiragil etzlo bahakafa, that he is normally giving credit to this employer. So because I already have the relationship with Stan, the storekeeper, so as a result, Stan knows I'm good for it. It's as if I've already paid him when he now gives to John and to Jane the food that they want. And so as a result, if they buy Shemitah produce from Stan, or Truma produce, let's say it's only for Kohanim, and they buy the wrong produce because it's less expensive. So now I've bought Truma produce that is wrong, or maybe I bought Demai produce, the produce that we don't know whether Truma and Meisers have been taken. So the bottom line is that that's going to be a problem. So the mishtabele, because I have my property has already been encumbered by my debt to Stan, and therefore it's as if I've already paid for it. As Rashi says next, Rashi demishabile, hi balabayas. This employer, the homeowner, mishaisa deyav chenveni pere, from the time that Stan, the storekeeper, gives the fruit and the produce to the workers, it's as if I exchanged the money that I'm giving to Stan for this produce directly. And so to Kevan to Orchila Kuve Kanile Dinar Gabe, as a result, it's as if it's already acquired by Stan, and therefore that's why it's a problem in that case. But in the other case, in the case where Rabbi Yanai is dealing with it, we're not dealing with a storekeeper who extends credit, and therefore that's not going to be a problem. Okay.
Well, what is the problem with extending credit? I don't understand that.
The point is that we have somebody in the where you're going to call him Stan because it's the first two letters are the same as storekeeper. So Stan the storekeeper. I like alliteration. So Stan the storekeeper, right, is going to transfer Shemitah produce to which he shouldn't do because, so we're not talking about this stand, just to be clear, is which he shouldn't do. He's going to transfer it to my employees. Well, and because he regularly extends credit to me, so now it's as if I directly bought that Shemitah produce. And you're not allowed to engage in business with respect to Shemitah produce.
Right.
And therefore I've done something prohibited. And the money that's associated with it is something prohibited. And so the analogy is to, and so how do we now differentiate this case from the case of Rabbi Yanai? Well, in the case of Rabbi Yanai, the poor people are not regular creditors of Rabbi Yanai, and so they don't regularly loan money to Rabbi Yanai, and therefore, even though then when they give Rabbi Yanai the produce, Rabbi Yanai now owes them the money, but that's a debt, and it's not. There's no specific collateral or any kind of relationship that suggests an obligation immediately. And so as a result, Rabbi Yanai didn't have that relationship, and the payment only becomes a true payment after the Shemitah food is already eaten by Rabbi Yanai and his family. And so as a result, the payment doesn't happen when the food exists. Unlike when my employees go to Stan the storekeeper, when Stan the storekeeper transfers the food to them, at that moment it's as if I paid him. And so as a result, at that moment the food still does exist. And so therefore Rabbi Yochanan's explanation can work.
But why
Okay?
not say that the storekeeper will transfer the food a year later after Bior? Well, why can't you use the same concept, the same?
No, because the problem is that I'm telling my employees to just go out and get whatever food they want. And it could be that the Stan, the storekeeper, is selling even post beer, selling the Shemitah food. He's
Oh, so
selling it during
he held it. He didn't get rid of it. You're saying
Yes, that's exactly right. And so
you
as
don't
a
know
result,
that. You don't
what?
know that. You'd have to examine that, right?
Correct. We don't know that. And that's precisely why we need to be concerned. I can't just allow my non Jewish and non knowledgeable workers to go out and buy anything they want. Because if I do that, then maybe they'll buy the wrong thing. And then it'll be as if I bought it. Whereas if I give them the money up front, well, then it's their money. They could do whatever they want with it. It's not, it's up to them to do the right thing. It's not on me to do the wrong thing.
Is
Now,
the store? Do we assume the storekeeper is Jewish?
we can no, we don't need to assume the storekeeper is Jewish. The storekeeper might not be Jewish. The storekeeper might, could be not Jewish, could be a Russia, could be anybody.
I'm just thinking if the storekeeper was Jewish, then would be choshid b'kasherim. We went.
No, well, we could. The point is that on some level we are choshed, not b'ksherim here. We are choshed with those who don't know, and there's a difference. So the
Right.
point is that they don't know. It's an amaretz. So the situation. So the point is that when the person doesn't know, that's where we have to be concerned. Okay. All right. So now the Gemara again. So about chenveni she'ein makifo mai. So 1 second. So if in fact there is no tradition of, I don't have the relationship with Stan the storekeeper, well then, so then the implication is mutar. Then the implication is that this would be permitted. Well, ihachi aditani tzu v'ichlu b'dinar zeh tzu shasu b'dinar zeh. Rather than the first case that's permitted, me telling the workers, here's the dinar, go out and buy what you want to drink and to eat. Liflog v'litnei b'dida. Let's use the same case. Let's use the same case of go out and eat and I'll repay, and I'll pay for it. Use that same case and say that one case is, and say and say when is it prohibited? It's only prohibited when the storekeeper extends credit to the employer on a regular basis. Because as a result, my money becomes immediately due and encumbered to the storekeeper. But otherwise it would be permitted. So why not distinguish on that case? And moreover, when it comes to the storekeeper who does not extend credit, mi lo mishtabed, is it really true that my produce doesn't already, that my property does not already become encumbered? V'ha'amarava ha'omer l'chavero. That the point is that when you do something for somebody, you immediately become, if you have a commitment to that person, you immediately become liable to that person. So ha'omer l'chavero, if you say to your friend, tain mana laploni, give this $100 to so and so. And if you do that, if I say this thing, give $100 to Mark, and through that giving of $100, I'm going to sell you my talus, that's a valid sale because the benefit, even though you didn't pay me, but you gave me a benefit associated with your giving the $100 to Mark. So as a result, it's an actual opportunity for you to acquire something. Kana medin arv, and it's based on the concept of a guarantor. Because if I say to you, Stan, that I'm going to guarantee a loan that you make to Mark of $100, what do I do that somehow obligates me?
You're guaranteeing it.
I'm guaranteeing, but words in Jewish law are not enough. In fact, even in writing, it's not necessarily enough. There needs, just as we have in civil law in the United States and elsewhere, you need this idea of what's the word I'm looking for? I hate it when I can't remember the word. You need the concept is that you need to have an exchange. There needs to be a corresponding value that you are giving to me. And I just like on the tip of my tongue, and I just can't get it. So my apologies that I'm having a senior moment. In any event, the point is that unless you have given me something, there's not an obligation. So what is it that obligates me when you give the loan? The obligation is based on the fact that I ask you to please loan to Mark based on my guarantee. And so as a result, the benefit that I get of you going ahead and making that loan, that's what obligates me. And so similarly here, when I say that I'm going to pay Stan back when Stan the storekeeper back when he gives the food and the drink to my workers, I am automatically obligated myself. It's not just a voluntary payment any longer. I truly owe you, and I have become, my properties have become encumbered and as credit as owing you money. And so as Rashi says, we're now Rashi Samach Gimel Amabet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up from the bottom of Samach Gimel, of the narrow lines in Samach Gimel Amabet. Kana, and the aleph changes halokeach to hanotain. Hanotain and nechasav. Hanotain, that it should be read the following. Kana hanotain, that the one who gave the $100, right? I asked you to give $100 to Stan, and in exchange, I'm going to give you my talus. You, through that giving of the $100 to Mark, as nechasav shelzeh, you've acquired my properties. Va'aval gaf de lo mata hanas. Even though you did not give me the direct benefit of the $100 right into my hand because you gave it to Mark. But nonetheless, that's you've given me a benefit. And what's the basis? Medin arv. Next Rashi, Ma'ahu, and the Bays changes it to Dina. Ma'ahu Dina, from that law, to Mechayiv Arav Lishlome, that just as a credit, as a guarantor, is obligated to repay if the debtor doesn't pay. Even though there was no direct payment to him, he didn't get the $100 that was borrowed, it went to the borrower. But nonetheless, because of the action that was done by the lender in exchange for that in exchange for that promise. So that's why the promise becomes an obligation. V'hainami, and here too, lo shna. It doesn't make a difference whether or not there was already a custom of lending. Alma alva gaftu lav chandvini hamikipo, who, even though the storekeeper did not regularly lend money credit to the employer, ki yahiv le lishluche mishtabed le hai. As soon as the storekeeper gives the produce to the employees, the employer is obligated to him. And so as a result, the money is just like it doesn't make a difference whether it's going to be whether there's a custom of a lending relationship. It's going to be an immediate payment for produce that could even be Shemitah produce. And therefore, that's going to be a problem. And if that's true, maybe we should say the same thing by Rabbi Yanai. So Ella Amar Rabba. So as a
Who's
result,
obligated? Once you've made this, almost like it's not, well, I won't say it's a lien, but you've inured yourself, and you've asked your friend to give money. You've asked this person to give money to your friend.
yep.
So in this case, Mark, let's say, but it's a loan. So who would be the recipient of the repayment of the loan? Now you've also given the talent to the other
Oh,
person.
no.
Gift.
The
You've given
talent
them a gift.
situation, the talent situation is not a loan situation.
It's a gift. No,
It's a gift.
but you
Both are
asked him
gift.
to
The
loan
$100
money.
is a gift. No, the $100 is also a gift.
Oh, that's also a gift.
Yes. In that in the situation where we're talking about it's also a gift. And the point is that gift situation works based on the analogy to the guarantee situation.
I thought
Right?
because
So-
you were using the word loan in there a few times.
Yes, because the analogy is to the guarantee situation, and in the guarantee situation, it's a loan. Meaning, again, the reason that Stan takes ownership of my talus as a result of this transaction is because he gave a benefit to me by listening to me, just like if he were to have made a loan to Mark and I said that I was going to be the guarantor of that loan. The fact that he made the loan to Mark would also be considered a benefit to me, and so I would become obligated through to be the guarantor of that loan. So the point of this statement,
Well,
where
who
it
gets
said-
who gets the money back from the loan then?
Oh, so Stan would get the money back from the loan.
It's like
If Mark doesn't pay, I pay Stan.
I'm not gonna-
Right.
Okay. All right. So now we
So
bottom
what's the
line.
benefit to you?
That's exactly the question. That's the biggest question in connection with the guarantor is why is it that I am obligated? And the Rishonim go into that. And the basic idea, that's the simplest idea, and I think the right idea is that I benefit when Stan listens to me. And indeed, we distinguish between cases where I act as a guarantor before the loan is made, where I don't think I even need to make a kinyan. There's no kinyan that's necessary in our relationship. As soon as Stan loans the money to Mark, I become obligated if Mark's unable to pay back. But if, on the other hand, I only say to Stan, I've learned that Stan lent money to Mark, and I say, listen, I'm a nice guy. I'm going to guarantee Mark's loan. Well, now, because there was no action that was done as a result of my offering to be a guarantor, I actually have to make a formal kinyan, and only through a formal kinyan do I become obligated. And so that's you're exactly right. There is a very big question of what benefit did I get, but the general understanding is that the benefit that I got is that Stan did what I asked. And
No,
so,
so what? I mean, you ask him to take out the garbage. You ask him, he's doing you a favor. What? So he listens. I'm not
Yes.
sure where the real benefit is that he just happens to listen to you. You said if you want him, you listen to a story you're telling him.
I understand.
What are you gaining from
You're
that?
absolutely right. This is not simple. You're 100% right. This is not simple. And if not for the fact that we say that there is this concept of guarantor, then you might not have thought it up ordinarily. But we believe that there is a concept of guarantor, and that in fact, notwithstanding all the things that you're saying you're 100% right. I agree with everything that you said, but we say that that is enough. And so there are other approaches, to understanding how the guarantor process works. Again, they're all based on some level Stan doing what I asked.
Okay, but if you create you create a guarantor, you create yourself, you're creating yourself as a guarantor. That doesn't seem like a benefit. It seems like an obligation.
Yes, I'm making an obligation on myself.
What?
But if I say to you, I'm going to give you a gift of $100, I am not obligated to give you that gift. I can take it back anytime. So what is it that about the words that I say that I'm going to be a guarantor for Mark that make it different from just saying I'm going to give you a gift? And that's the point. The point is that it is different from just saying that I'm going to give you a gift.
Oh, it's different. I agree, but what's the benefit? What do you gain?
I understand. 100%. Look, we got to go
I
on.
know. Okay.
But the point is that is the law. That's the way that is. And so now Rava offers an alternative approach. Ella Rava loshna makifa loshna she'ain makifa. It doesn't make a difference whether there's a custom to extend credit. Even though somebody has a property that's encumbered, because he didn't specify the specific item that's obligated, lo mitzer, nothing is prohibited. So when second, if nothing is prohibited, if nothing is identified, how come in the case of the brisa, I have to be worried about my employees going to get? I haven't specified anything that would go to Stan the storekeeper. Elahacha amai choshesh mishum shvius. Why do we need to be worried about shvius, about Shemitah year produce? Halomi yachid shibudeyacha. I didn't necessarily specify anything. So Amar Rav Papa clarifies, no, kagon shehikdim lo dinar. We'll say that the case is where I, as the employer, have already given Stan the storekeeper the $100 that my employees are going to use and eat from. And so, well, 1 second, if you and so if that's true, Amar of Kahana, Amrisa l'shamaita kamei de Rav Zvid. I told this all in front of Rav Zvid Minaharda, who is from Naharda, and Amrli ihachi adatani tzeu v'ichlu tzeu shesu v'ani poreya. When we say in our in this brisa that you should go out to eat and go out to drink, and I'm going to repay. It should say I should calculate because I already paid Stan. So why does it use the phrase of I'm going to pay? It should be I'm going to figure out what I still owe him, right? And so as a result, so Amri Slay. So I said to Rav Zvid, Tani. So change the language of the brisa and have it be I'm going to calculate it. Rav Ashi says again, based on Rava's core, that we're not going to distinguish between extending whether a credit is extended regularly or not. Rav Ashi says, no, we can modify the case as follows. We're dealing with a situation where the employer took the food with his hands and gave it to the workers. And so as a result, Amar Le, Rav Yemer, Rav Ashi, so Rav Yemer says 1 second, Ihachi, Adatani Tsu Ve'echlu, Tsu Shasu. Instead of saying go out and drink, go out and eat, Tulu Ve'echlu, Tulu Ushasu Mibaile. It should have been take and eat, meaning take the food that I've already gotten for you. And it should be the language. So Amar Le, so yeah, Tanei Talu Ve'ichlu Talu Ve'ushasu. So yeah, change it to take and eat, take and drink. So the bottom line is the point is that if that's the situation where it would be prohibited. Again, somehow I'm going to actually receive it, but you're going to choose it. And so that would be the situation. Okay, so now having gone on this aside, we now return to the topic of our Mishnah, the prohibition to benefit from wages to work with Yayin Nesech. So Yosef, Rav Nachman, Ve'ula, Ve'avimi, Bar Papi. So all of them were sitting together. Yosef, Rav Chia, Bar Ami, Gabayhu, and Rav Chia, Bar Ami was sitting with them. Yosef, V'kami Boilu, and they were wondering about the following situation. Scharo Lishbor, B'yayin Nesech Mahu. What if a non-Jew, an idolater, hires you to break all of his yayin nesach so that he spills it all out and it all goes to waste. So mi amrin and keva derota b'kiyumi aser. Well, listen, at the moment that you're hired, you want every one of those barrels to stay whole. Because if a barrel were to break on its own, you would get less money because you wouldn't have to break it. So you want the continued existence of all that yayin nesach. So maybe that desire, that momentary desire, until you break the cask, you want it to exist. So therefore, the wages that you pay to break it should be prohibited. Oh, Dilma, kolama ute tifla, shopir dummy. Or maybe the fact that you're being hired to reduce the amount of silliness, of futility, of wicked stuff, meaning the yayin nesach is prohibited things. So maybe that desire to eliminate that's a good thing because and therefore it should be permitted. And Amar Rav Nachman says, Yishbar v'tavo olav bracha. No, you should break it and you'll get a blessing. So lema misayale. Now let's say that the following brisa is a proof to Rav Nachman, and with that we're going to conclude. Ein odrin im ha'ovid kochavim b'kalayim. You're not allowed to hoe around kalayim plants for an idol worshiper. Meaning, even though it's owned by the idol worshiper, there's a general prohibition of creating kalayim, of mixing species together. Aval okrinimo kedelema tifla. But we have a brisa that specifically says that you are allowed to be hired by the non-Jewish employer to destroy the kalayim. And that's because by destroying the kalayim, by uprooting it, you are eliminating, you're reducing the amount of futility in the world, of silliness in the world. Svarua, so they said, ha money, who is this brisa? Rabbi Akiva, this brisa is Rabbi Akiva, de Amar hamakayim b'kalayim loka. He says that if you even just facilitate the continued existence of kalayim, you'd get lashes. And so as a result, if you put up a wall around kalayim to protect them, even though you didn't enhance their growth, that would be enough to make you subject to to lashes. And therefore, what are we saying here? This is going to be Rabbi Akiva, because after all, he says that the situation that you, as Tosa says, Perish afil Rabbi Akiva. Really, this brisa is even Rabbi Akiva. That this brisa is consistent with both Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. De'ila Rabbanan lechudayu. Because if this, as again, first full Tosos on Samak Damad Alamnaf. If this, in fact, this brisa were only according to the rabbis, my area Okrin. Why did it need to tell us that you were uprooting? That you would be allowed to uproot the plants. Afilu makaiman nami shari. You would even be allowed to put a wall around it. That according to the rabbis, just being makayim klayim is not enough to get you penalized. Elatana okrin, but the fact that we learned okrin l'divrei akol, it must mean that this is a brisa going to everybody. V'afil Rabbi Akiva, and it even follows Rabbi Akiva. V'chein reisha, and similarly the first part of the brisa where we say that you're not allowed to hoe around kalayim, the Tanya ein odrin. L'divrei akol, that also is according to everybody. V'af l'Rabbanan, and even according to the rabbis. De'ilu Rabbi Akiva, because if it was only according to Rabbi Akiva, litnei ein mekaymin, he should have said, the brisa should have said that you're not allowed to even put a wall around, because he prohibits rolling around. V'kol shekain ein odrin, and you certainly wouldn't be allowed to hoe. So as a result, this brisa is according to Rabbi Akiva. And now that we say that this brisa is according to Rabbi Akiva, here we have somebody who says that you're not even allowed to keep something. And so just as you can't keep kalayim, that same principle is that you can't keep yayin nesech. And so just as you can't keep yayin nesech, and now we say that you're allowed to destroy it, so too, when you can't keep kalayim, you're allowed to destroy it. And so Titania, and how do we know, last line, how do we know that in fact Rabbi Akiva says that even maintaining Klayim is a problem? The Tanakama says that only if you pull out weeds or cover the seeds with earth, that's going to get you lashes because you're helping it grow. Rabbi Akiva Omer Af HaMekayim. No, even if you just maintain it. And my time of the Rabbi Akiva, why does Rabbi Akiva say that? Because Amar Kra, Sadcha lo Sizra Kilayim. The Torah says that you should not sow your field with Kilayim. Now, the fact that the word Sadcha comes first, Ainli Elazorea, that just tells us that you can't sow with Kilayim. You can't enable the growth. Mekayim Anayan, how do I know that you can't even maintain it? Talmud Lomar, now this is based on the Mesoras Hashas, Kalayim Sadcha Lo. That in fact, the language of the Torah has Kalayim. The word Kalayim is right before the word Sadcha, and so as a result, we can combine that Kalayim with the Kalayim at the end, and we have 2 times the word Kalayim. And so we say that Kalayim Sadcha Lo, that you shouldn't have any Kalayim even in your field, meaning even maintaining it is problematic. Tifla Shari. And nonetheless, we're going to say that when it comes to destroying it, that is sufficient. So right now we say that this Baraisa appears to support Rabbi Nachman, but is it in fact going to support Rabbi Nachman? If you want to figure out whether or not it in fact supports Rabbi Nachman, you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
The
Sorry
Mishnah,
for going a little long.
The Mishnah in Shkalim, there's Mishnah in Shkalim. It says that I think it's the 15th of Adar. There are different things they have to collect they tell them that's the time to collect the shkalim,
Yep.
Before the year. And it says there in the Mishnah that they also have to announce to the people about kalayim. And they have to tell them that to inspect the fields. And if they don't, then later in the month, the court sends out inspectors to check the fields to see if they're kalayim. And they're empowered to uproot the kalayim. And then they throw it and to tell people you shouldn't be doing this. And if they still see kalayim later, then they uproot the field and they put it in the main street to show people you can't have kalayim. And if they still don't, after there's still kalayim, they inspect it. What they do is they take the field away from the people to punish them that you shouldn't be having. You're not allowed to have kalayim. They confiscate the field.
So it could be that that's one of the reasons that they specifically say that this is talking about somebody who's not Jewish who owns a field. And so as a result, that...
Well, in this case, they're Jewish people.
What?
These are Jewish people.
I understand. So I'm not sure why are you just saying that for our own information, or are you saying
for information? No. It's
okay. I thought you were asking a question.
No, I'm bringing up the guy when we're talking about kalayim. They have to
yeah, 100%. So I was taking it as a question because you could ask, well, how was there kalayim in existence in our case? Well, maybe what you're saying is highlighting why the Gemara specifically says that the kalayim is why the Gemara specifically says that the kalayim is in a field of a non-Jew, and because otherwise it would have been destroyed by the inspectors. You're exactly right. So
the non-Jew,
the Gemara specifically said in the case we're talking about that it was by a non-Jew. So that's exactly
well. I mean, a non-Jew can have kalayim, right?
Yes, I know, but a Jew's not allowed to be hired by the non-Jew to facilitate the growth of that kalayim. That's the point. That's what the prohibition is. But you are allowed to be hired, according to this brisa, to be hired to destroy the kalayim. Even though you obviously want the kalayim to exist for as long until you destroy this particular bush or growth, you want that to continue to exist. And so as a result, even though you want it to continue to exist, just like the Yayin Nesech, we're going to say that you're allowed to be hired to destroy it. All right, and we'll figure out whether the analogy is a truly good analogy. We'll find out tomorrow.
You're saying who wants it to exist? The non-Jew?
The worker wants it to exist. The Jewish worker wants it to exist because otherwise he's not going to get hired. He's going to be hired for 2 seconds instead of 3 hours.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Have a great day and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Okay.